Good morning. Does that sound good? Whoops. So my name is Linda Farrenkopf, and I want to welcome you all to today's panel on the role of a manager in an Agile organization. A little bit about my background. I've been working with Agile teams since 2000, kind of before it became a big movement in the Midwest. But I've played Scrum Master roles, Agile coach roles. I've been a development team member. But I love Agile. I'm really passionate about it. And I'm excited about the folks we have to speak with you today. They have some incredible experience undergoing Agile transformations in their organizations. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then we'll talk a little bit about why it's important, why you really want to learn about the role of the manager, what are the key things we're going to cover, and we'll start asking questions. So I'll let my esteemed panel introduce themselves. We'll start with Dan.
Hi, I'm Dan. Are we ready? Check one. There we go. All right, I'm Dan Kohler. I'm actually an application delivery manager at AEP. So actually we were just kidding earlier about traditional organizations and where agility fits into that. So you probably heard a little bit of that today. I've actually, very similar to Linda, played a bunch of different roles. I was a Scrum Master before, I'm a product owner for multiple projects, and a program manager that tried to do as much as I could with agility across multiple teams. So hopefully that will be what you'll hear today.
Good morning. My name is Bill Gubser, Manager of Delivery Methods and Practices at NiSource, the parent company of Columbia Gas. In my current role, I've got a team responsible for taking what I think of as the theory of Agile and how do we make that real for teams in terms of making sure everyone's following a common set of standards. My background was a developer, card-carrying PMP, so primarily waterfall, but don't hold that against me. Really have embraced agility and as part of the Agile transformation at NiSource, trying to transition us from a waterfall-heavy organization and adopt Agile practices and principles.
Hi there, good morning all. My name is Angel Henry. I come right down the street from you all in Indianapolis, Indiana. And I am a senior director of our value management office at a software company on the northwest side of town in Indy. And how my Agile journey started is much like my esteemed colleague here. I was a PMP manager and was miserable. And my supervisor quite literally tapped me on the shoulder. It was, I'll never forget, it was 2008. I was expecting my little one, who's back there in the corner. And she said, I want you to go to Scrum Master class, but what I heard her say was Scum Master. I literally heard the word Scum Master. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. And I went kicking and screaming and fell in love with Agile. And it has permeated my life. It saved me, got me through the pandemic. And so as I am practicing at work and at home, the Agile principles and values, I just love spreading that and the joy that I have for Agile to others. So I'll go from company to company, organization to organization. That will allow me and spread that love. And now I get to do it at a global organization, and we have a small team of Agile coaches that are supporting 700 consultants worldwide, and we are all learning a lot as we go through this transformation journey together. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Kuya Manchanja, and I'd say these folks over here are more experienced and adept in Agile than I am. So my journey with Agile started in 2015. My then professor, now boss, Cindy Casebolt, kind of introduced me to Agile, so Agile 101. And so when I was going through that class, I'm like, this makes sense. it just makes sense. Like life is definitely very much fluid. You have to be flexible, adaptable, and much like society right now, we live in a very, I'd say, microwave type of society, right? So people want things, but then you go to McDonald's, there's a line there, you're like, nope, I'm gonna go to Wendy's just because you don't want to wait. And so much like the customers we work with, people do change their mind. So Agile really made sense to me from that perspective. And so I've probably been in roles that I've always been a project manager, but then I've been in Agile teams as well. So I always have like a look inside as a PM just to see how teams kind of operate. And so I'd say my perspective will be a little bit different than my panelists here, just because I'm mostly a project manager. And so we'll see how everything goes. But I'm definitely an Agile lover, because I think it works really well with my life, and has obviously gotten me to where I am right now. So look forward to speaking to everybody and kind of engaging with you guys today.
Great, thank you. Why do you care about the role of the manager in an Agile organization? This role is often misunderstood. Some people, when they hear that their company is undergoing an Agile transformation and that the teams will become self-organizing, they get fearful as a manager. It's like, okay, what will my job be in the new world order? Are they no longer going to need managers? What will I do on a day-to-day basis if the teams are managing themselves? How will my role change? What will be my opportunities for career advancement, for pay increase? How does that all work? And they talk about, I've been with different organizations, so Huntington Bank, Alliance Data Systems, NetJets, John Deere, GE Aviation, as they're undergoing the Agile transformation. And they talk about the frozen middle layer of management and how that can tank a transformation, right? So the senior leaders are all excited, let's go Agile. The people down on the front lines, okay, let's do this thing. But if the management layer, they're the ones who truly hold the key to success for the transformation. If they're engaged, if they're on board, it makes the difference between success and failure. So I have a list of questions that I'm gonna ask the panelists, kind of put them on the spot with some tough questions, and then we'll open up the floor, and I'll come around with the microphone if you guys have questions for our panelists. So let's dive right in. And Kuya, we're gonna put you on the spot first. Like, what makes a good leader?
All right. Well, I think, leadership for me, it's definitely subjective, from where you sit, depending on who you are, you can, lead towards people that you kind of see yourself in. So for me, when it comes to what makes a good leader, honestly, the biggest thing would be a person who has a lot of empathy, somebody who can really foster and build relationships, just because I feel like, especially in an evolving world, in an agile world where people are expecting a lot of change and they're fearful for change, I think as a leader, you want to put yourself in their shoes, kind of see how these things that you're bringing forth actually affect these people. And so I think that comes with a few things. You want to be honest to your team. You want to be able to trust your team that they will execute on these changes. And when you come up with a different process to kind of implementing these changes, you communicate that to them often and as clearly as possible. And then, kind of win people over slowly, just because they're going to be naysayers. People always resist change. And so I think some of those characteristics really, really matter. And, two quotes that I wrote down, just because my folks here are much more experienced, so I just tend to write a lot of stuff down. The first one would be, people, purpose, and performance. So that was by Simon Sinek, just because I was listening to something recently, and managers have so much power over their employees that they have more authority on their health than even their physicians. So having that power to affect somebody's life every single day, I think should definitely make you pause when you come up with different things and how you interact with your team. And then the other quote by Oprah Winfrey was, everybody wants to feel like they matter. They have a voice. And so when you're going through different transformations and even coaching, for example, just listening, and somebody could be like, I'm struggling with this thing, but I've been in calls in agile teams where the manager is just beating somebody up, for not executing on something. In the back of my head, I'm like, that's not how you win this guy over, So I had a conversation with said employee. I was like, dude, how do you feel? It's like, man, I just screwed up, more work came in that was a high priority. I didn't get to what we're supposed to work on. And, this meeting had about 20 people on, so he just belittled me, and 2 weeks later, the guy quit. And so I think that's the type of power that, managers have, and, I think that's a great way to answer that question, leader. So, good leaders definitely have to be really conscious of their power and ability to affect people's lives on a very real basis.
Great. Thanks, Kuya. Dan, would you have anything to add on that?
I was going to say, what he said.
Yeah, exactly.
No, actually, I'll add a little bit more. I mean, I think, Kuya talked about creating that psychological safety when you're talking about empathy, and that's a huge part of leadership, just making sure that people feel comfortable raising things, in terms of issues, both in personal, but then also within the team. And creating that environment, I think, is the first thing a leader needs to do, is build a culture for that. And so a big part of what I try to do is establish that across, not just within my team, but then teams of teams. When you think about, as I mentioned before, that kind of program manager role, I wanted to ensure that every team could speak to each other in a way that was safe, in a way that made a lot of sense, and that we were okay. If something happened, certainly there were going to be failures, there are going to be things that happen that we didn't like, some upset occurs, and then it's best to be able to have those conversations then about that. And so I think it's really important from a leader to do that by also modeling that behavior as well. And so I think that's the biggest part. The other part, though, is inspiring, right? I think the other part is to really try to understand what this team is capable of doing, both at an individual level, but then also as a team level, and look for that and try to help grow the team in that way as well.
Mm-hmm. Great. So what does a leader of an agile organization do differently that a traditional leader doesn't do? And so, Angel.
I would say that a leader is a leader is a leader. And they're going to show up and show out regardless of what organization they're in, even if that environment and that culture is toxic. You will still see them rise to the occasion as best as possible to remove impediments and barriers for their team, to be that support system, and to be that cheerleader, and to be that coach and that mentor and that guide. That individual is that individual no matter where you put them, even if they are literally a diamond in the rough. So the difference, though, between environments, between traditional or an agile environment, is truly that organization's system and the processes and how they are supporting the manager. So if you are a leader or a manager and you have an agile mindset, regardless of your title or position or authority, you just have that innate agile mindset, and you are taking it upon yourself to learn and practice the principles and the values. If you're in a traditional waterfall or command and control environment, or worse yet, an environment that's toxic, you will be consistently trying to maneuver and try to get around and trying to help. And over time, that's just going to wear you down. And then you'll see folks like that, they'll just exit, or they'll start to diminish or pull back because their psychological, the energy that they're putting forth to try to make change and to try to be innovative and to try to support their people is constantly getting knocked down. And I'll give you something really small and specific. When I was an agile leader and I had a team and that team did phenomenally well, I wanted to reward them. Something as simple as lunch. I just wanted to get lunch for them. The hoops and the jumps and the approvals that it took just to get them lunch. And then I go into an environment that is the opposite, where it's very people first, and it's very support the individual and the teams, and give people what they need. Hey, I wanna help my team out. They just killed this iteration. They knocked it out of the park. They delivered over what they want to. I want to reward them. Can we get them lunch? Yeah, sure. And by the way, let's get them some swag, and let's send them some t-shirts, and I'm like, whoa, where am I at? Right? So that's the difference. But again, a leader is a leader is a leader. You're not going to stop doing what you're doing, but the environment that you're in is going to make it a little bit easier for you to do that. And that's why you see folks that are in a waterfall or traditional environment end up kind of languishing longer than they need to, because they're not able to do what they need to do to support their teams.
So Bill, I'm going to pose that same question to you. What does the leader in the Agile organization do differently?
I think of some examples where I've got some good comparison and contrast. Leaders that are, and again, like Angel said, it's all about mindset. And as a leader, are you comfortable enough to give your team the autonomy, or are you stuck in your old habits of command and control, waterfall or PMP, traditional style types of management, where you need to know where every task on the status board is, and where everyone is at, and when's it going to be done, and how long is this going to take, as opposed to setting the strategy and the direction of the team. So for example, my team, I think of myself as the product owner. So I'm ordering the work, I'm setting the priority, but I'm letting the team execute. And a lot of times I like to get my hands in there with them as a member of the team, but setting aside that administrative manager aspect, and when we're doing work as a team, we're a team of equals focused on executing and delivering value to the business. And so for me, it really comes down to mindset and just letting the team execute and bring their talents to the table and help deliver value.
Great. So what areas do you focus on with individuals and with teams? Dan.
Yeah, so I do a lot of coaching within the team space, both individuals, like you said, as well as teams. So it depends on the role. And so when I think about what I coach Scrum Masters around, it's typically, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? What's the mood of the team? What do you think they're ready for? Looking from that perspective through the Scrum Master also gives me an understanding where they are. If they're still kind of in the mode of, hey, our Scrum events are going great. Like, okay, then we'll stay around that kind of maturity level. But then if they start asking, hey, I really like to introduce Kanban to the team, then I can start to talk a little bit more in depth about other options. So really trying to gauge the maturity of the different roles. Same thing with the product owner in terms of the questions or guidance I might play with that particular person. Understand that, again, looking for that maturity. Where are they in their growth so that we can have the conversation at that level and walk the path with them. Same thing with the teams themselves. Just, we do Gemba walks every week and intending to just really understand what's happening. Just hear them, same types of questions. What's the mood of the team? How are we doing? What are things that you're worried about? Very much the same types of questions I ask individually as I'm asking the same to the team. Not to get the same type of answer like, well, she said, it's more of, getting an understanding of where that team is. And to me, I think there's both kind of the organic component of a full member team has its own personality and its own capability as well as the individual. And so I'm not obviously focusing on career development with a team, but But I am focusing on, what does that team look like a year from now? What are they wanting to do? Individually, I'm focusing on what that career progression might look like, what things that person might be interested in, and is this team providing that? Because it might be a time where that particular person is not geared for that. In particular, an example of that, I have a team now that's not so much able to do a lot of development. It's kind of a consulting role, and that's not for everybody, especially someone that wants to get deep into the code and really fine-tune things. And so I had to have conversations with people who, even though they were absolutely fantastic and I loved them to death, it wasn't the right fit for my team anymore. And I wanted that particular person to be happier going somewhere else than being miserable with me, which kind of feels odd. But at the same time, it's the same thing, in terms of trying to help understand what that person needs as well as what the team needs as well.
I know you mentioned the Gemba walk, and I'm thinking some of the folks in the audience might not know what that is as a management tool. Could you just define that, Dan?
Sure. In fact, I'll actually give the AEP does a acronym for this as well, so I'll use that first. We call it a CORE visit. CORE stands for Coaching Through Observation, Recognition, and Engagement. But a Gemba walk is a lean management tool, a lean systems component where you go to where the work is and you talk to the people who are doing the work to understand where things are. It was something that Toyota Systems did, early on, and it still is something very true. I find it highly valuable because you're getting within the space. I'm looking at the same metrics they're looking at. I'm talking to them about the things that upset them or the things that they're working on, things like that.
So, Angel, what areas do you focus on with teams versus individuals?
Teams versus individuals. So I would say, in terms of advancing or maturing a team, starting with, absolutely the Gemba walk, some basic assessments, a lot of listening and observing. I find that that's the best practice. And then once I've done the listening and observing and kind of assessment phase, then I'll go into the let's set some goals and objectives, right? Let's look at where some practices might be off or loose or softened and tighten those up. And then once we have that level of maturity, then let's look to start advancing to, mixing and adding various methodologies, advancing the team towards a higher level of delivery, expanding their mind when it comes to value and thinking about the customer and looking at it from a customer-centric perspective. Now, caveat here, y'all, I got to be honest. I have never personally had the luxury of working in an organization that started out as Agile, and it was Agile from the beginning, from the ground up. But I do have a consortium of Agile coaches and consultants that I work with, and a team of us that are kind of informally together, a band of Agile coaches and women that we work together throughout Indianapolis. And I have a lady that I work with, and she has had that luxury. She's with an organization that started probably 15 or so years ago, and they were Agile from day one. And so we're constantly kind of comparing, and I realize how much effort it is to get an organization to constantly to change their mindset, to break some of those old command and control authoritarian, measurements and metrics, and get them moving towards Agile. And so that's what I spend the majority of the time doing, really, is I'll see the vision, I'll see of where the team can go, but the majority of the coaching that we do from a team perspective is actually getting rid of some of those self-limiting beliefs and some of those old paradigms and old ways of looking at how work can get done, and more importantly, how to measure how that work gets done.
I'm going to move this microphone. Hopefully that'll still work. Back to you, Kuya. How can you help teams become more self-organizing or self-managing?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, and this is something that one of my coaches had a conversation with, he definitely said, and I think Dan actually said this, letting the team, or either build it, letting the team make choices as opposed to making choices for them. And so I think that goes a long way when it comes to showing that you have a lot of trust in them, and in turn, that trust as a leader is going to come back to you. Just trust is earned. You can't really buy trust. And so I think as a manager, you want to provide all the necessary tools to help the team be successful when it comes to those coaching opportunities, making sure that, hey, I know this individual is limited in this area. Maybe I can provide X coach, like an individual help them out, or maybe help them out with a course that you did that helped you out. And so I think that's something that's going to take time. But again, echoing what Dan said, you have to understand where the team is, where the individual is, and just how you can actually help them grow and mature into a better organization. So I know from my experience at Cardinal Health, Cardinal, this is my previous employer, so they're very in between. So there are some sections which are extremely agile and some sections which are extremely traditional. But when the CEO, is it the CEO? Yeah, when he speaks, there's a lot of agile speak, like we want to be more agile, we're going to be more agile. And so when you think about that, I was in a traditional PMO there. I'm like, to my manager, so how are we becoming more agile? Like we literally have deadlines that we cannot move. If something moves, you guys are, pretty much trying to kill us here. And so how do we become more agile? And so with me, I take it upon myself to be an individual and be like, okay, when I run my meetings as a PM, I kind of conduct lessons learned after every issue, after every risk, so let us embark on this journey, see how this goes. Why did this happen at this point in time? Kind of have that framework, that mindset where you're like, okay, I understand what Agile is. I know people don't understand, but I don't really impose that on them. I just kind of do it. People typically like it because it's almost like a psychological warfare. They don't even know what's happening here. It's like, we're just going to have this as part of our agenda today. Mm-hmm. Do it. People are like, yeah, that makes sense. So there's nothing lingering until the end of the project to have a lesson learned, which is kind of crazy. So I really try to just learn as much as possible with the Agile methodology, and then kind of bring that forth slowly. But I know, some of my colleagues probably have a much better example of how they've been able to kind of, make teams more agile.
So, Bill, what are your thoughts about helping a team to become self-organizing?
So first, I just want to respond to something you just said about lessons learned, because our former CIO, before he retired, he always said the traditional style of waiting till the end, he called that lessons documented, because it's too late at that point to incorporate change. And so one of the things we're trying to incorporate, even with our traditional delivery teams, is to pull in some of these agile concepts, like a retrospective, more periodic, doing net promoter score of their stakeholders. And we started doing this with our larger projects, and one of the interesting findings was we had these PMs of large multi-million-dollar projects, and they'd say, we're not sure who our stakeholders are. And this was not, onesie twosie. It was a common theme that for the transformation team that I'm part of, that was really eye-opening, that they would have that response. They're like, we don't know who to send this survey to. So I think as leaders, we need to look for those opportunities of, what are these agile practices that we, meet people where they are. And I think, like Angel, you were saying, of one individual who was kind of agile from the beginning, that I think anecdotally, my experience is that's an exception, and a lot of us are dealing with, long, well-established organizations, which is a great thing. But then the culture shift that we're part of, and how do we find agilists who maybe even haven't self-identified as an agilist yet, but people who are at all levels of the organization, either, you know, the senior leaders, the middle management layer, or even individual contributors. You know, I think it's how do we find those people, and how do we, you know, pour gasoline on that fire and let it spread. And so at least what we're trying to do where we're at is, yes, we have true Agile teams, and we have a whole vetting process to identify them and make sure they've got good support from their executive sponsors. But it's also looking for how can we move traditional teams in that direction and pull in some of these things like a more periodic retrospective. Even if you are a waterfall team, you can still, you know, take a pause periodically and as a team discuss. And because I've helped facilitate those lessons learned, and everyone always says, this is a great conversation, but we all wish we would have known this 4 months ago when we were, you know, before we started testing, and we could have made some adjustments.
Okay, so we're going to address the elephant in the room next and talk about how remote work has impacted agility in your organization. So Bill, I'll let you talk about NiSource.
So for our organization, we are heavily outsourced. So we've got teams not only based in the U.S., so primarily Columbus and northern Indiana. We also have our developers are offshore in India. So for me, I think going remote in the pandemic has really leveled the playing field, because everyone is in the same mode of working. Everyone is remote. And I know I was very guilty pre-pandemic. We'd be in a meeting, and I like working visually, so I'd grab the marker and start going on the whiteboard, and we'd be discussing in the room, and there would be the silence on the Polycom on the table, and it's like, oh, they have no idea what we're talking about. And then having to kind of rewind the meeting and you know, talk the folks on the phone through, okay, here's what we're thinking. I think being remote is, like I said, it's leveled the playing field, but you know, it's the theme that we've heard with that keynote. I think for those of us that are, you know, seeing friends and colleagues that we haven't been in person in a while, you know, humans are social animals. We do need this in-person interaction.
Yes.
So I think at the end, it's been good that it's been a leveler, but there's no replacement for in-person.
Okay. Dan, would you tell us a little bit about how it affected your teams at AEP?
I'm just going to say first, I remember the Wednesday before all of this stuff started, I said to my peers, you know, I think we should try something here. You know, a lot of people are starting to talk about remote work. I think we should try to just run a quick experiment and see what's going to go wrong. And I think let's just try like the next 2 days to see what happens. See, you know, maybe it's going to be something that goes wrong with the Polycoms or at least the you know, the meetings and things like that. And then we never went back. So that sucked. But it was a great experiment because we knew what we were going to get into. But actually, I'll say one more thing, I guess. You know, for me, walking the halls of 7, all of the Agile teams within our program were on 7. All of them had Agile spaces, and I absolutely just loved walking through and hearing the chatter of the team. Like you could tell, like just by walking by, that team is really got it, and I absolutely miss that. Mm-hmm. But we've actually adapted pretty well, you know, after saying that. So I will say teams brought a significant amount of agility back into the organization. We were trying to use different applications, mm-hmm. and because of the hodgepodge, it was difficult. I think teams kind of leveled the playing field, like Bill, you mentioned. Mm-hmm. But for us, you know, the very first part was struggle. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I still have a problem with not being in the office and and everything. So we are full remote right now. We get into the office every once in a while for special events. The hardest thing was starting a new team remote and having, to me, like the first couple of weeks with the team and just understanding it and really melding that team together. You can get through kind of the storming, norming, performing stages quickly. But in a remote world, you can't. It doesn't, well, I can't say you can't. It's harder. And so just recognizing that as a leader as well, so it's going to take a lot longer to get people up to speed. And, some of it has to be kind of forced. Like, hey, let's have a happy hour and things like that. But it's been interesting.
Thanks, Dan. Angel, back to you. How do you know when to lean in versus when to pull back?
Yes. How do you be a successful parent is what I heard, that question. That's what I heard. That's what I heard. When you're supporting teams, the best advice that I can say from lessons learned experience is you're really going to have to lean in and develop your own emotional intelligence. So before you step into an agile role, I'm like, yeah, we're getting DISC, 16 personalities, Myers-Briggs, whatever your flavor is or that your organization does. That's step one. Step two is emotional intelligence 2.0, right? This is all around, if you're going to embrace the notion of self-organizing, self-managing teams where the decision making is down to the lowest level. We have a lot to unpack there at a psychological level, at an inclusion level. I have, it's been pushed back where a developer on my team was it was a lead tester, absolutely uncomfortable. He's like, Angel, in my culture, we're not gonna push back. If our manager says, get this done, it's gonna get done, and I'm not gonna raise my hand and tell him no in the middle of a team. That's rude, that's inappropriate, that's unheard of in our culture. So there's a lot of layers when you start layering in, global and women and generations and all the different layers of inclusion. So that's why I say you need to start with an assessment of you, your personality and your style, and how you give and receive feedback. So actually, it's all about you for a very long time. And then you can start getting good at being clear and directive and changing how you communicate to the different personalities on your team and those that you work with, your peers and your senior managers, because that's going to lead to the best results. So how do you know when to lean in and when to pull back? That's a you question. You have to do that self-assessment. And what I just tell people is that you're going to make a mistake. You are absolutely, if you are practicing something, you are going to make a mistake. We actually have to just learn, especially in corporate America, that that's okay. And the environment has to be psychologically safe to make mistakes and to learn from those mistakes and not be penalized. You have to start with yourself first. You yourself have to be okay with making a mistake and say, you know what? Oh my gosh, I am so sorry. I was a bit more directive in that stand-up than I should have been. Or, oh my goodness, I started giving out tasks in that stand-up. What was I thinking? I made a mistake. I'm sorry, I apologize. If you see me do that again, please stop me, please correct me, please help me. Let's help each other in this. And when you come at it from that perspective, then we are all learning and practicing together. And so when you go to lean in, you're gonna lean in wrong. Absolutely. And that's okay if you have created an environment of psychological safety and trust and open and reciprocal feedback. If I'm gonna get on my soapbox here for a second and say all these practices and principles and things that we're talking about in Scrum and stand up, exactly what Molly was saying earlier, that's all cute and fine and dandy, but we miss the boat when we do not set the foundation correctly. And the foundation, y'all, has absolutely nothing to do with software. The foundation has absolutely nothing to do with how well you can do a point. The foundation has to do with people. So I would much rather engage with someone who has a psychology degree than an IT degree or science degree, because the foundation has to be set solidly before we can start layering in practices and start allowing people to have self-organization and self-management. Because without that foundation, it's going to get broken.
Thanks, Angel. Kuya, would you have anything to share about when you know it's time to lean in?
I'd say Angel definitely covered a lot of things,
Yeah.
I was just going through it. I'm like, yep, trust, people, emotional intelligence, obviously all those things are absolutely key. So I think, you kind of want to have the finger on the pulse constantly with your team and yourself, be very, very self-aware of, yep, these are the consequences of my actions to the team and then to the individual. So I think, Angel, really, really well said. I really can't add any more to that. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of someone with a psychology major, Dan,
Philosophy.
I think it was philosophy, right? Which, again, it goes well with the Agile mindset. But so I'm going to ask you, Dan, candidly, what's one mistake you've made as an Agile manager?
Well, I guess I'll be vulnerable here, huh? So yeah, philosophy is not psychology, but similar. So actually, I'll go back to something Angela you mentioned as well, in terms of how to talk to kind of your organization, because I definitely didn't do that right, and that kind of bidirectional communication that Melissa talked about it earlier. I thought that we were in a different spot than where we were in an organization, and when I pushed further than what my leadership was comfortable with, without giving them an heads up, hey, this is what the experiment I'm going to run this time, that caused a lot of pain. And certainly, coming from a traditional organization that, even though we've been going through our transformation for almost 12 years, it seems, there's still a lot of things that people cling on to, and the perception of that movement that I was trying to do looked differently from that traditional leader than it did from my perspective. And so without having communicated effectively as to, hey, this is what I'm trying to do, this is what you're going to see, this is what the team is going to be doing, it can create a lot of upset. So.
Thank you. Angel, what's one mistake that you've made?
I was guilty of doing some really boring retros. Oh my gosh, even I was getting sleepy. So I had to learn to kind of like give that up. I remember when I was a Scrum Master, I had this probably from that old IT traditional PM mindset that I had to be the one that set up the structure. And I started off saying, okay, these retros are boring. I'm going to sleep. I got to come up with something. So I started doing the different ideas, the sailboat and the blah, blah, blah. We've all been there. And I felt so much pressure to every 2 weeks come up with something different and fun and engaging. And after a while, I'm like, wait a minute. I don't have to do this. I can turn this over to the team and they can start doing their own retros and coming up with things to do. And that's exactly what I did. And so that, that was like one aha moment that I had for myself in that time period of making that transition from traditional to agile, is that this feeling of I have to own it and it's all on my shoulders and I have to be successful. It's like, we're all this I stuff, cut that out. This is we are in this together. And so when I was able to kind of catch myself whenever I was doing the I thing, and then just replace that pronoun to we, that really helped with that mindset and the tradition. But before, I definitely was making the mistake of trying to take it on myself and creating the structure for the team and kind of guiding them. I saw myself as a guide, and I have grown more to let go of some of that control and move into the coach mindset.
So Kuya, I'm going to turn it to you first on this one. Describe a win you have had. When you think of something in your career, maybe a win that you've had along the way in your transition to the Agile mindset leader role.
So I think a win, probably for me, I would have to say just the discovery of Agile, So I think once you find out that there's something out there that you did not know, and then you find out that you have a passion for said thing, I feel like that's when, like you kind of go into overdrive, So I'm very much a traditional project manager, so I'm very process oriented and I tend to stick to things. So Agile obviously is not, it has process, right? There's a framework. But at the same time, I think it uses a lot of prioritization in your everyday. And so once I started kind of reading a little bit more into Agile and really understanding that, this is definitely just a mindset thing, like I have to be able to pivot at certain times, you still have a plan, you still have an end goal, you still have a customer, you still have a deliverable, but things can change. So anybody who has a kid or a toddler, which I do, you're agile because your kid throws things at you left, right, and center. You had a really long day. The same thing that worked yesterday is not going to work today. You got to wake up and in the middle of the night stay up for 2 hours, sometimes 4 hours, and you still have to keep going. So I'd say all of us, I think, are inherently agile. And if we were to kind of name anything, I'd say obviously we're all adaptable. Of course, some of us do it a little bit better than others, but I'd say that. Just knowing that it's a mindset thing, like that's, like a win for me after, kind of went to college and kind of understood Agile and then started reading up on it. And, it just makes me a little bit more flexible, a little bit more adaptable. I wake up not sleeping too well and I feel good about it. I'm like, it's okay, he's going to sleep well today. So that's how kind of you approach, I say even customers and work and colleagues. So people change their mind all the time, but that's okay. You may have put in 30 hours into this project and they're like, nope, we're going to scrap that just because we want to go a little bit different. But you're like, dude, that's going to take like 20 hours of coding. We did all this work. But you're like, it's cool. I'll, kind of engage with my peers and then kind of, pivot and start going there. So I think having like an archive of all these documents, all this work really helps out as well. And also a mental archive of different things in your life that happen so that when you see the same situation come up again, you're like, yep, I've been there, done that, I can pivot and I'll still be okay. So say, just the discovery of Agile really just makes life a little bit easier for me every single day.
Right. I have a lot more questions, but I also want to give time for you guys out in the audience to ask the panel questions. So I don't know whether I can get the microphone to you or if you have a really good voice.
I can do both. Hey everyone. Ooh, it's quite loud. My name is Art. I'm an Agile coach and trainer. Agile, thank you so much for telling about the basics, right? Like we need to have values, we need to build trust as a managers. That's what I'm personally teaching, and that's what's very hard to establish with new managers or managers who spend a lot of time in a traditional environment. My question to you, to all of you guys, what would be your advice to those new managers when they have their personal goals and expectations that are being set on them and they do not have this time probably to build this trust and to focus on those values when they expect it to deliver and their teams expect it to deliver? How should they act in this situation?
I can take a stab at that, and thanks for the question. So I think, again, from my standpoint, because again, a little bit different from my peers here, it's understanding what Angel said, like where are you with agility? What is your proficiency level? How much work do you need to put in to be able to actually learn what you need to deliver, right? So I think it's understanding yourself, understanding the people that you have, the teams that you have, how mature are they, and then kind of creating a plan of how do I get to X amount of proficiency, and how do I really make sure that I hit the ground running and deliver, to your expectations and to the people that want you to deliver. So I'd say really a lot of introspective thinking, kind of seeing where you are, and then just kind of creating a plan to be like, okay, these are my weak points. These are the weak points of X, Y individual. These are the weak points of my team. And these are the strengths that we have. So we can capitalize on what we have as strengths right now while we slowly work on weaknesses. So that's how I would approach such a situation with like a newer manager. And then of course, knowing that you're gonna mess up and you're gonna skip a few things, you're gonna still be a little bit more direct with your team, and maybe you wanna be a little bit more authoritative with the team. But at the same time, you still wanna be able to catch that as a good leader and be like, okay, I need to step back and kind of build on that. So that's how I'd approach that personally.
Thank you.
I'm going to say 2 words. Work boundaries. Now let me explain what I mean by that. When you are in a transformation, especially like the ones that we are mostly used to, which is going from traditional to agile, we place way too much pressure, way too much burden, and way too many unrealistic expectations on that middle layer, period, point blank. There's a lot of information and a lot of training and a lot of coaching and a lot of attention about selling to the executive leadership team, right? So you've got the big Deloittes and PwCs and Sagettis, and they'll come in and they'll do their show, and the executive team is like, yep, I want that. I can get it to go faster. I can get more bang for my buck. They sell them on the idea. And then you get a bunch of agile coaches to come in and teach the individuals how to do Scrum, Kanban, et cetera, fill in your flavor of the day. And this middle layer is pretty much all ignored. They're invited to the training maybe if they have time. They're unclear about their role. No training, time, or attention is spent to them. And they're quite literally caught in a tale of 2 worlds. I see a lot of heads shaking and nodding, right? Because they're expected to still deliver on the OKRs and the blah, 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 and the blah, 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 and the stoplight colors and the reports and the dashboards. That still has to happen. But at the same time, you get us coming in here talking to them about psychological safety and what's your DISC profile and what are your strengths, and lean into being a team player, and don't be too commanding, control, and directive to your team. Just let them self-organize. And they are literally going schizophrenic. We are causing that pain for them. We are. And so in order to help to answer your question directly, that individual, you support them in raising their hands and saying, hey, there's so many hours in the day, 6.5 to be specific, because I do get to go to the bathroom and have meetings. So when you start carving off meetings and admin time and all that, it's really about 4 hours. I got about 4 hours in the day to do some stuff, to get some deliverables done. Do you want me delivering? Do you want me hands on the keyboard, crunching out code or reviewing or do you want me supporting the team? Or do you want me to do both? And if you want me to do both, okay, because we're caught in this half agile, half waterfall world. So I guess I'm going to spend about 2, maybe 2.5 hours of my day, hands on keyboard, actually creating PowerPoints and deliverables and dashboards and crunching code or doing code reviews. And then the other couple of half of my day, I'm going to spend in training and learning about how to support my team and how to get them through this transition. But we never tell the people it's okay to raise their hand and say, I can't do both jobs at the same time. Instead, we expect them to do both, and it's causing them to be schizophrenic. It is absolutely demoralizing the team below them, and is absolutely causing frustration and anxiety to the senior managers above them. That's the world that we have unintentionally created. And in order to get out of that, each and every one of us, from individual contributor, Scrum Master, traditional IT manager, whatever, coach, whatever it is, you're gonna have to set work boundaries. You're gonna have to have those crucial conversations about what it is that I'm delivering, what the expectations are, and how I'm going to be delivering it. Because, and here's the hard part, we're actually transitioning people. Instead of crunching out code and how quickly can you measure something and get something out the door, we're actually supporting how they work more. We're transitioning to true knowledge workers. And no longer in a remote world can he walk through and see his teams and hear them chattering. No longer can he do that. So now we've got to measure how people work differently. And we're not doing that. We're ignoring it. And again, it's causing schizophrenia, it's causing an issue. So to answer the question directly, help that individual set appropriate work boundaries given the unique situation and the culture that they're in.
Thank you, Angel.
Others, do I see other hands here? And again, so you talked a little bit about setting boundaries and about performance, but for organizations that are not at a team performance evaluation level and are still working in teams but having individual performance evaluations, with managers who aren't hands-on with them, who are people managing but not in the delivery, how are we evaluating, how are we helping them feel good about what they're writing about those individuals for their performance reviews at the mid-year, end of year, one-on-ones, things like that?
So I can start this one. I think first, when as a manager, when you're setting those yearly objectives with your team members, it's not being handed down or pushed down from on high, and that's the reality. Is that's how it works. But it should be, like Angel said, setting boundaries and having the conversations with, these are the conversations I have with my boss and I try to have with my team. What can we commit to this year? And you mentioned mid-year. Our fiscal calendar is January through December, so our review cycle is on the calendar cycle. So this is fresh in my mind because we just wrapped up mid-years, and we had significant work come in, and so my job as manager was conversation with my leadership of, okay, we can do this new thing. Here's what we had on our plate. What do you want us to stop? And again, thinking as an agilist and sustainable pace, and then having the conversation with the team and everyone as a team and individually. Okay, what adjustments for the rest of the year do we need to make to our objectives? Because my goal is I'm setting myself and my team up for success. So at the year end, we can say we've met our commitments. But it's okay from when we're thinking about performance reviews and those objectives, in my mind, to say, okay, we need to inspect and adapt, and we need to reorder the backlog of our objectives and how do things get reordered. And that's okay. But it takes some, as a manager, especially depending on your organization, it takes some courage to have sometimes those difficult conversations, especially if you've got a leadership team that's used to, pushing things down and just, get it done. I don't care what it takes, but this is what needs to be done at the end of the year. And so just developing those skills to, manage up to your leadership and like you said really nicely, just setting those boundaries. I don't know if anyone else has.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll go a little bit here as well. It looked like, did you have a question similar or?
Jesus Christ, I'm in the same boat as you are right now. I have some fantastic Scrum Masters, but I'm literally just the manager of the developers.
Right.
And this is brand new.
Brand
Brand
new.
new, this role, right? I'm literally just the manager of software developers. I have nothing to do with their day-to-day work. I have nothing to do with anything that I'm used to, right? Prior military, was the team lead of help desk, whole new atmosphere. What I'm doing for my teams is I go to the Scrum meetings, and then what I'm implementing is essentially brag sheets at the end of every sprint. Write down everything that you did during this sprint, and then we'll do a quarterly review so that you're on the same page and I'm on the same page. That's what I'm doing for my teams, so that's what I would recommend.
And so for me, I do a little different. You'll probably hear that a lot, right? You know, degree in philosophy, I think a little differently. And I have no idea about business whatsoever. They just pay me to do it, which is awesome. You know, so for me, like, you know, I think it's first making sure that you're aligning the goals appropriately for what the organization wants, very much to what Bill, you're saying. You know, it's really understanding what part I play in that as a developer or a Scrum Master or whatnot. It's about getting feedback from the team, right? Not so much just, you know, what did I say I did, but what does Bill say I did? And especially your best friend will be the Scrum Master. The Scrum Master understands what's happening in the team, how that particular person is contributing to the team. But the other part to me that I play more in terms of my mid-year and my annuals is really around kind of that person's goal, right? Not so much the metrics, not so much the what did they accomplish, but who do they want to be? Because that to me is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like I don't really spend a lot of time like, yep, you did this. I freaking hate checkboxes. There's no checkbox in philosophy, by the way, not a single one. And so when I got into this business, I thought like, screw that. Let's talk about the things that matter. And to me, that's about trying to get the best person tomorrow, right? How am I building that person? And so those personal goals are the things that drive the things to me that matter the most. And it feels like that person on the other side of the table cares about that too.
I'm your psychology degree.
We've got another question over here.
Thank you. I'm Crystal Lane. I am an Agile lead, is what we call it. So it's a Scrum Master plus some. I'm also considering getting a psychology degree, so I think I'm in the right place. My question is slightly different. I wanted to know if you have any tips or suggestions on how you re-engage leaders who may be middle managers who maybe have been Agile enthusiasts but have been burned or have had some bad experiences with the bureaucracy, command and control environments. How do you re-engage those people? Because we know transformation happens over time, and it's a journey.
Great question. Who wants to jump in?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's going back to inspiring, right? There was something that person cared about first, and it's kind of been jaded for some reason. And so to me, I'd go back to that and start there. Like, what made you like it before? And because there's something there that got blocked. And, you know, having had some moments, some upsets that I created in our own organization, that I say, like, there are people that are not happy about some of the decisions I made. But at the same time, I knew heart of hearts, my values were set appropriately, I'm going this direction. And so to me, that person ended up trying to do something that the organization wasn't ready for, and to go back and to have the conversation with that person to say, you still have this drive, you still have this thing, but you need an advocate. You need some other people to get you a little bit further help. And as soon as you have somebody else, it may have to be higher in the food chain because of the organizational culture, that helps through some of that as well. Otherwise, you know, that person might have to decide, is that organization right for them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Next question.
Okay, I'm looking at my notes here, and you guys have put a lot of stuff out there. I'm trying to synthesize it all. And I'm fortunate in that I've had the opportunity to work in a company that was transitioning to Agile, and I've had the opportunity to work in a company that was Agile from the beginning. So I guess some of the things that you've said that I find really interesting is, you know, talking about the power dynamics of a manager and understanding how they're responsible for creating that psychological safety. And you know, I just find myself, I hear a lot of conversation, hear you guys talking a lot about different roles and understanding boundaries. So I'm just going to ask the most simple question, you know, like you have roles in Agile, well, actually, technically, I guess you have roles in Scrum as, you know, the Scrum Master and the product owner, and, you know, they all have very succinct roles that they're supposed to play. What is the role of a manager?
at least for where I'm at NiSource, because I get this question from my peers all the time. What am I supposed to do with this Agile team? Maybe some members report administratively, but not, the Scrum Master reports to somebody else, and the manager is ultimately responsible for the output of the team. I answer it pretty simply. As the manager, I see you as the first level of escalation with that team. So if they've got risks or issues or dependencies with other teams that they're getting stuck on, hopefully that it's the Scrum Master that's bringing those items to you, but have your ear to the ground. The things like a sprint review, daily Scrum, these are public events. Your managers are busy, you can't be at every meeting, but you should have a sense of what's happening with the team. And then for us, a lot of it is, we refer to it as feeding the machine and all the administrivia and financial management of the team. And it's really the managers are not hands on the keyboard, but they're the ones making sure that those things are happening according to the standards that we've set.
Back to the elephant in the room. If we had a truly flat agile organization, you wouldn't have a project manager, you wouldn't have a manager. You would have a very employee-centric support system. So you would have someone, I don't care what you call them or what title they are, but it would be someone who is doing exactly what he just said. Supporting the individual from a growth perspective. Where do you want to go next? What skills do you want to learn? What new thing do you want to try? What team do you want to go to next? And how would you fit there? That is a very employee-centric, human resources, training, development, give them what they need to be their best selves and for us to match their skills and their strengths with organizational need. That is a pretty cool job to have, and I would love to have it, and that be just it. But from traditional organizations, we have what you just said, some of this administrative stuff like checking off people's PTO, and don't even get me started, and some of these financial overhead things that I quite think could be done by a financial analyst and other people outside of the core team. But what we're talking about here is if we had our druthers, we would create, if we all got together, we would probably create a very different climate and a very different way of working. And, to the lady here who said, look, I'm working with what I got, but they just, I have a team of people that are all over the place, and I can't follow them around from stand-up meeting to stand-up meeting. So I'm just gonna, hey, write your brag board down. I'll take a look at that. But really you can just hear it in her voice. What she just really wants to do is just support those people. And if they're developers and she's not, okay, they can go get their development skills and their development, sharpen their development saw from a technical advisor. Someone who isn't a people manager, but who loves the heck out of technology and who loves, C and JavaScript and blah, 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 blah. And they're really good knowledge. We've completely lost the whole concept of apprenticeship in companies, right? She's like, you developer, if you want to know about JavaScript, go to a JavaScript person who's knowledgeable in that, and that's their expertise. Me, I just want to support you. So I would recommend that instead of kind of back to the check the box, what did they measure, what did they do, did they finish all their all their cards at the end of the day? No. How were they as a team member? Let's talk about their critical thinking skills. When you're having a one-on-one with them, no, I may not have been in your stand-up, but talk to me about a problem that you're having with that particular team and how you plan to get through it. And work with them from a very critical thinking, knowledge management standpoint, instead of trying to worry about following them around and checking off boxes and measurements that are very It's the one thing that we don't do. We do a disservice. Metrics, performance, management, all those things, all those stoplight colors and dashboards and things that we used to check off productivity completely changes in this environment. And again, that's back where you're stuck. So, exactly.
Yeah.
I know, and when he said, was everybody else getting schizophrenic when he was talking about yearly reviews? I'm like, but we don't deliver things 1 year at a time anymore. So why on earth would anybody set goals in January and then review them in July and December? Like we're changing quarterly, monthly, heck, in our environment, sometimes every week. So it's like, in order to stay fluid and up on it, this has to be a constant conversation and not a check the box exercise every January, July, and December. But we all, you get caught in the middle. And so you got to get creative about the hoops and jumps. You really do have to be agile with a little a in order to be successful.
So I'm going to jump in here. We're at the rapid fire wrap-up question. What is one piece of advice? We'll start with you, Kuya. One piece of advice for a new Agile manager. You got to be fast.
Yep. I'd say just a book recommendation is called Rebels at Work by Laurie Kelly, I think, and Carmen, can't remember. But so this book really helps with understanding like the role of a manager, and not just a manager, but an employee, right? So we always have to manage upwards. We all manage. I mean, we have to report to somebody, even a company, to stakeholders. And so I think the book really assists with many things that we spoke about today. So like emotional intelligence, how you approach difficult conversations, how you manage different teams and different organizations, and also allowing people to be future thinkers. So people who come up with brilliant ideas, you don't want to shoot them down. You want to hear them out, So kind of how to find your voice within the workplace. I'd say, that like definitely read that book. It's really, really great. So Rebels at Work, recommendation from me.
Great. Thanks, Kuya. Angel?
Cool. Get that assessment. Assess your own emotional, where you're at on the maturity curve, and get 2 mentors, one inside the organization and one outside the organization.
Speaking of books, David Marquette, Turn the Ship Around, quick read. He talks a lot about allowing decisions to happen where the work happens, and not so much asking leadership for permission, but informing them this is what you're going to do. And he talks a lot about, although he doesn't call it psychological safety, it's really empowering the team that when, as a leader, if you're wrong, pointing the team in the wrong direction, that the team feels empowered and comfortable to point out when you're wrong. Great book. It's really influenced my management style, and it dovetails nicely into Agile principles and practices.
I'm going to go with Aaron Rodgers' Patience. So if you remember a few years ago, Green Bay ended up really being really crappy at the beginning. He goes in front of the camera. There's just vitriol coming from both the fan base, the owners, everybody. And all he did was say, patience. And what did they do? They ended up getting much better through the season. They didn't get to the Super Bowl, but at the same time they did really well. So to me, the biggest word that I would give anybody for advice in being an Agile leader anywhere in the organization is it's not going to take 2 days. It's going to take years, and have patience with that.
I really want to thank our esteemed panel and thank all of you for your engaged participation. I think these guys will be around at the conference if you want to grab one of them on a break or sit next to them at lunchtime and ask more questions. So thank you all.